If you leave Daniel for me, I will allow you to finish your secondary in peace. But if you don't, I will make your life a hell in this school. I will never. I am done hiding from you.
This is the first time Ruth spoke back to Ella since they met in the school, and Ella was shocked. Not just shocked but frozen. For a moment, the air between them felt heavier than the silence that followed Ruth's words. In the middle of the classroom, right in front of a few students who paused to watch, their steps slowing, their ears perked up. Ruth didn't stutter. She didn't flinch. She stood tall, her voice clear as glass, eyes firm and unmoving. Ella's threat had the same venom it always carried, but this time, it bounced off Ruth like rain on a rock. Ruth had clenched her fist, looked straight at Ella and said, "I will never. I am done hiding from you." You see, Ruth had always been the quiet one. The girl who hugged the walls during breaks. The one who ate lunch alone. The one teachers praised for her brain but classmates mocked for her background, her old uniform, or the bag she has been carrying since JSS 1. And leading the charge of humiliation was always one person, Ella, the principal's daughter. Ella wasn't just popular. She was untouchable. Her father ran the school like it was his kingdom, and she, the crown princess, walked its halls like they were her private runway. And even though she never admitted it, Ruth was the only student she truly feared. Not because of her wealth or status, but because Ruth was smart. Brilliant, in fact. The kind of brilliance that no amount of foundation or followers could replicate. But Ella had a weapon, power, and she used it ruthlessly. From JSS 1 to SS1, Ruth endured it all: locker pranks, fake letters, ruined textbooks, whispered laughter, stolen test scripts. And for years, she said nothing. Not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't believe her voice had value. She had grown up learning to survive, not to speak. But everything changed the day Daniel resumed. Daniel wasn't just a student, he was the owner of the school's son. The only boy in school with 2 private bodyguards waiting in the parking lot and an international accent that made girls giggle before he even spoke. He was handsome, yes, but more than that, he was kind. Quietly kind. He came in like a storm but moved like a whisper. No one expected him to talk to Ruth. In fact, no one expected him to notice her. But on his very first day under heavy rain and an unwelcoming sky, Ruth saw a boy at the gate, standing lost without a uniform or an umbrella. She didn't know who he was. All she saw was a drenched student. Without thinking, she raised her own umbrella and offered to walk him in. They didn't talk much that day, but Daniel never forgot her face. What followed was a slow blooming of friendship. First, it was lunch. Then, it was him borrowing her notes. Then, it became walking to class together, staying back after school, studying together. But more than anything, Daniel did something no one had ever done for Ruth. He saw her and boosted her self-esteem. And with that gaze came something Ruth had never held for long: self-worth. It was subtle at first. The way she lifted her chin while walking. The way she stopped apologizing for speaking. The way she looked people in the eye. Confidence began to fill her step, and Daniel never said it out loud, but he noticed. And so did Ella. Jealousy is a dangerous seed. And in Ella, it grew fast. She watched as Daniel laughed at Ruth's jokes, walked with her to the cafeteria, even waited for her after classes. The very idea that someone like Ruth could threaten her spotlight was unbearable. And so she waited, and planned, and finally confronted Ruth in the classroom while other students were walking towards the door with her final card. But this wasn't the Ruth from JSS 1. This Ruth had something stronger than fear, a reason to believe she mattered. As students whispered in the background and Ella tried to gather her words, Ruth stood up, walked away, not out of fear, but out of victory. The silence she left behind was louder than any insult Ella could have thrown. For the first time in 4 years, Ruth had won. But what she didn't know was that this was only the beginning. Because behind Daniel's smile, behind the growing friendship and behind Ella's obsession was a secret Ruth had no idea existed. A secret that could change everything. When Ruth walked away from Ella that day, something in the air shifted like an earthquake no one saw but everyone felt. People didn't say it out loud, but eyes followed her down the hallway with a different kind of gaze. Not pity. Not amusement, but a quiet kind of respect, the kind that makes people step aside without realizing it. That moment, though small on the outside, was peaceful for Ruth. For the first time in her life, she had said no to fear. But courage isn't a one-time thing. It has to be built, tested, and proven, and Ruth was just getting started. Ella, however, stood rooted where Ruth left her. Her hands balled into fists, her carefully polished nails dug into her palm so hard she almost bled. That wasn't just a public embarrassment. That was a declaration of war. And no one declared war on Ellen Nouku, not in her father's school. When she finally moved, it wasn't back to class. It was straight to her best friend, Anita, the girl with loose morals and a tighter mouth. The one who always knew how to twist things in the most damaging way. Anita was the type who never lit the fire, but always poured fuel once it started burning. She has feelings for Daniel, Ella hissed, pacing behind the SS1 science block. That's the only reason she would dare stand up to me like that. Anita leaned against the wall, arms crossed, chewing gum like it was someone's destiny. And what if she does, she said, raising a brow. The boy clearly likes her too. Are you mad? Ella spun around, eyes blazing. He's mine. Everyone knows that. Anita smirked. You sure? He doesn't look like a guy who wants to be owned. Ella's chest rose and fell quickly, but she said nothing. Because even in her arrogance, she saw what Anita saw too. Daniel's eyes, those gentle, curious eyes lingered on Ruth. And that terrified her. Ruth didn't know this storm was brewing. She had returned to class, sat in her usual spot by the window, and stared out blankly at the school field. Her heart was still beating fast, but not from fear, but from something else. A strange kind of release, like someone had loosened the invisible chain around her chest. Her seatmate, Queen, nudged her softly. Babe, that was weirdo. Ruth turned to her and blinked. What? The way you responded to Ella was like a movie. Ruth chuckled nervously, her shoulders stiff. It just came out. I didn't plan it. Queen smiled. Maybe. But it needed to be said. That evening, as students packed up their bags and poured out of the school gate, Daniel was waiting under the tree near the staff room. He had a book in hand but wasn't reading. His eyes scanned the crowd, searching. And then he saw her. Ruth, he called, raising his hand. She looked up, surprised. Hey. Daniel's smile was soft but warm. Mind walking with me? They strode quietly along the school fence. Ruth clutched her bag to her side. She had never been alone with him for this long outside class. I heard what happened today, Daniel began. Oh, Ruth muttered, her cheeks flushing. I guess everyone did. He looked at her, thoughtful. I'm proud of you. Ruth blinked. No one had ever said that to her before, not even at home. I mean it, Daniel continued. You didn't let her define you? That takes strength. Sometimes I still feel scared, Ruth admitted, voice low. Like the next moment will ruin everything. Like it was too good to be real. Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her. You're allowed to be scared, but don't let it stop you. For a brief moment, their eyes met and something unspoken passed between them. A flicker. A pull. Ruth quickly looked away, her heart pounding. Thanks for walking me, she said. Anytime, Daniel replied. But as they walked further, they didn't know Ella was watching from across the staff building, her eyes dark with rage. And the next day, she struck. It started with whispers. She used juju on Daniel. I heard she's been sneaking into the boys' hostel. She's desperate. You know those poor girls. Everywhere Ruth turned, someone was whispering, glancing, giggling. Notes were left on her chair. One even had a drawing crudely sketched, of Ruth kneeling before Daniel with love hearts around her head. It hit her harder than she expected. Even though she had stood up to Ella, she wasn't made of stone. Her self-esteem, newly planted, was still a fragile seed. And the way people looked at her, it was like she had committed a crime just for being noticed. She didn't cry. But something inside her caught up. Daniel noticed the change immediately. Ruth became quieter, avoided eye contact, and sat farther from him in class. He confronted her once, but she brushed it off with a smile. Until the day she didn't show up at all. Where's Ruth? Daniel asked Queen during break. Queen shrugged. She said she wasn't feeling well, but something about it didn't sit right with Daniel. Not after the message he had received on his phone the night before. It was an anonymous text. Be careful. She's using you. Ask her what she really wants from you. Daniel knew Ella's tactics. He had grown up in elite schools all over the world, seen different shades of manipulation, but this. It felt deeper and dirtier. And just as he turned to walk away, he heard Ella's voice behind him. She's not who you think she is, she said sweetly. Some girls are just good at pretending. Daniel turned, his eyes hard. You should worry less about her, Ella. Ella smirked. I don't like watching good boys get used. That's all. He didn't respond. But inside, something was stirring, because even he didn't know Ruth's full story. Yet, the rain had started long before dawn, and by morning, the clouds still hung low like a heavy warning. School resumed as usual, but Ruth was absent again. Second day in a row, Daniel tried to stay focused in class, but his eyes kept drifting to the empty seat by the window. That seat was more than just a place, it had become her. Her silence, her calm presence and her quiet brilliance. Without her there, the class felt off balance. He waited until after the last bell before pulling out his phone and texting her. No reply. Then he tried calling but switched off. He couldn't ignore the worry growing inside him. Something wasn't right. Most students had already left for the day when Daniel made his way to the staff office. He walked past a few teachers and knocked gently on the vice principal's door. Mr. Nouku looked up, slightly surprised to see the air of the school at this hour. Daniel, he said, is everything all right? I just wanted to ask, Daniel began carefully, do we have Ruth's contact information, or her address? She hasn't been in school for 2 days, and I'm worried. The man blinked. Ruth is. Quiet girl, top of the class. Daniel nodded. After a moment, Mr. Nouku opened a drawer, flipped through some files, and wrote an address on a small piece of paper. Here. But Daniel, are you sure this is something you should be involved in? Daniel looked him straight in the eye. Yes, sir. I am. That evening, while most students headed home in school buses or private SUVs, Daniel had his driver take a different route towards the outskirts of the town. The road narrowed. Mansions turned into cramped shops. Smooth tar gave way to gravel and mud. Eventually, the car stopped in front of a small, worn-down building with a rusted zinc roof and cracked steps. Daniel stepped out, tucked the paper into his pocket, and approached the house. He knocked, and a minute, the wooden door finally creaked open, and there she was. Ruth. But not the Ruth he knew. Her eyes were swollen, not from sleep, but from crying. Her lips were dry. Her usually neat hair hung in loose, tired curls. And the moment she saw Daniel standing in front of her, she froze. Daniel, she whispered. He smiled softly. Hi. She looked behind him, as if making sure no one else had followed. What are you doing here? You didn't come to school, he said. I got worried. Ruth hesitated, then stepped aside. Come in. The inside of the house was dim and small. A single couch. A wooden table. A curtain instead of a door separating the rooms. There were no family pictures. No sign of joy. Daniel sat carefully on the edge of the couch while Ruth poured him a glass of water from a plastic container. You didn't have to come, she said, sitting across from him. I wanted to, he replied gently. Are you okay? She looked down at her hands. It's just everything. Daniel waited. He didn't push. He just gave her silence, the kind that makes space for truth. My mom is sick, Ruth finally said. Kidney issues. She hasn't worked in months. My younger brother's school fees are overdue, and I'm the only one trying to keep things together. Daniel felt a pang in his chest. I study because it's the only thing I can control, she added. And Ella, she makes everything harder. Daniel leaned forward. Why didn't you tell me any of this? She gave a small, broken laugh. Why would someone like me tell someone like you? Your word is different. He reached across the table and took her hand softly and respectfully. Ruth, I don't care about words. I care about you. She blinked quickly, her lips trembling. I've seen how strong you are, Daniel continued. But no one deserves to fight alone. She didn't respond. But her hand didn't pull away. And that was enough. That evening, Daniel stayed with her. They didn't talk much. He helped her cook noodles, fetched water from the nearby borehole, and even helped her study for an upcoming test. It wasn't grand, but to Ruth, it felt like someone had just lifted half her burdens and promised not to drop them. The next morning, Ruth returned to school, and with her came Daniel. They walked into the school compound side by side, heads turned, eyes widened. Even teachers looked up from their morning registers. Ella saw them from the balcony above the assembly hall, her mouth tightening. Daniel had made his choice clear without saying a word, but the war had only just begun, because when Ella saw them together, something inside her snapped. She wouldn't let go of Daniel so easily, and Ruth. Ruth had just stepped into the battlefield of a lifetime. The morning after Ruth returned to school with Daniel by her side, silence buzzed louder than noise. Students whispered behind cupped palms. Teachers exchanged knowing glances, and Ella watched it all with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. From the outside, she looked calm, but those who knew her best could feel the tension wrapped around her like a loaded spring. She wasn't the type to explode. She was the type to plan, wait, and strike when it hurt the most. Ruth tried to ignore the stares. She focused on her books, kept her head down, and walked with purpose. But every step in that hallway felt heavier. Because she knew this wasn't over. Ella wouldn't give up that easily. And she was right. By lunchtime, it started. An anonymous message was posted on the school's WhatsApp group. Just a sentence and a grainy picture, barely clear, but meant to sting. Even charity cases can seduce rich boys. The photo. Ruth and Daniel, sitting at the wooden table in her house the evening he visited. Someone must have taken it from outside through the window. The chat exploded with reactions. Emojis. Laughter. Subtle insults wrapped in sarcastic concern. Daniel saw it just as he sat for lunch. His jaw tightened. He stood immediately and walked toward SS1 block. Ruth was in the library and he saw her head down behind the glass walls. He walked straight in, ignoring the curious eyes. Ruth, he said gently, placing his phone in front of her. Have you seen this? She looked. Her face went pale. I don't know who. I do, Daniel cut in. It's Ella. Ruth looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. She's going to ruin me. Daniel sat beside her. No, she won't. Not as long as I'm here. But she's the principal's daughter, Ruth replied, her voice breaking. She'll twist everything. And people already think I don't deserve to even breathe near you. Daniel exhaled. Then we stop letting them decide what we deserve. He pulled out his phone again and sent a voice note to the same school group chat. To whoever posted that photo, thank you for capturing a moment between two good friends. Ruth is one of the kindest, smartest, and most decent people I've ever met. If you have a problem with her, you have a problem with me. He dropped his phone and looked at Ruth. Now, let's go finish that history assignment. And just like that, whispers turned to gasps. Because nobody had ever called Ella out indirectly, and certainly not someone like Daniel. By the end of the day, the group was silent. But Ella was not. In her room that evening, she shattered her phone case against the floor. Anita sat on the edge of her bed, unbothered. You're losing him, Anita said. Ella glared. No, I'm not. He's defending her in front of the whole school. I don't care. Anita raised a brow. You sure? Because he's making you look weak. That word weak stabbed deeper than intended. Ella stood. Her mind was spinning and calculating. She's hiding something, Ella muttered. There's no way someone like Ruth is that perfect. No way someone lives in that level of poverty and still acts like a saint. She turned to Anita. We find her weakness, then we destroy it. Meanwhile, Ruth on the other hand tried to carry on. She avoided her classmates, choosing to stay back after classes in the empty library. She found comfort in silence and books, words where no one judged her by her clothes or her last name. Daniel continued showing up, quietly, consistently. He would bring her snacks, carry her books, joke about difficult teachers. But more than that, he listened. He let her talk about her dreams, becoming a doctor, building a better life for her mother and brother, earning a scholarship. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was hoping. But peace never lasts too long when envy walks the same halls. 3 days later, it happened again. This time, it wasn't online. It was printed. Hundreds of copies of a fake love letter allegedly written by Ruth to Daniel were scattered across the school compound during morning assembly. The handwriting was almost believable. The words were filled with desperate pleas and false confessions. It was disgusting. Students laughed. Some read aloud. Others whispered again, twisting it further. Ruth's chest tightened as she saw one of the papers in her own locker. She didn't cry. But she was breaking until Daniel showed up at her side again. He held up one of the letters, turned to a group of laughing students, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, these are fake. And whoever wrote them should know, the more you try to humiliate her, the more you expose your fear of her light. Then he turned to Ruth and said, let's go. And she followed. It didn't erase the pain. But it gave her something stronger than silence, real, visible, fearless support. That day after school, Daniel asked to walk her home again. She hesitated at first, but agreed. They talked about everything except the letters. But as they neared her street, Ruth finally spoke. Why do you keep helping me? She asked. Daniel looked at her for a moment, then said, because you helped me first, that day in the rain. And because I believe in you. She looked away, swallowing a knot in her throat. And maybe, he added, because it's not just help anymore. Maybe I actually care. Ruth's heart skipped. But before she could speak, a car pulled up behind them slowly. Daniel's face stiffened. A tinted window rolled down, and Ella's father, Principal Nouku, was staring straight at them. He wasn't smiling. Ruth is, he said coldly, you and I need to talk, tomorrow morning before class. She nodded and walked into her compound. The next morning, the air inside Principal Nouku's office was thick with silence. The heavy mahogany door shut behind Ruth with a dull thud, making her flinch slightly. She stood near the edge of the office, barely inside, as if even the floor here rejected her presence. Across the wide desk, Principal Nouku leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed. His eyes, sharp, unreadable, and cold, rested on Ruth like a weight. Daniel came in and stood beside her, calm and still. But Ruth could feel the tension radiating from him like heat from an engine. The principal finally spoke. Mrs., do you know why you're here? Ruth swallowed hard. No, sir. He raised an eyebrow. You don't. She shook her head. He picked up a sheet of paper from his desk. It was one of the fake letters, crumpled and stained but still legible. Half the school has seen this, he said. Students are distracted. Parents are starting to call. Teachers are talking. And all this circles back to you. I didn't write it, sir, Ruth said quickly, her voice firm but respectful. He studied her, lips pressed into a thin line. Of course you will say that. Daniel stepped forward. Sir, with all due respect, Ruth is not behind those letters. Someone is targeting her. And I believe we both know who. The principal's eyes snapped to him. Daniel, This doesn't concern you. With respect, sir, Daniel replied, voice cool and steady, everything concerning Ruth concerns me now. The room tensed. Principal Nouku looked at him, then slowly turned back to Ruth. Mrs., I will not allow this school, my school, to become a circus. We run on discipline here. Reputation matters. Image matters. And your presence is becoming problematic. Ruth blinked. Her hands trembled slightly, hidden behind her skirt. Sir, she began softly, I've worked hard. I've never broken a rule, I've never. But drama follows you, the principal cut in. Whether or not it's your fault, you attract trouble. I think it might be best if you transfer. The room fell into complete, suffocating silence. Ruth's chest caved inward. That word, transfer, felt like an execution. Sir, she choked. I can arrange for your transcript to be forwarded to another school, somewhere less demanding. It's not a punishment. Think of it as a recommendation for your own peace of mind. Daniel's voice sliced through the room. No. The principal looked up sharply. Excuse me. She's not going anywhere, Daniel said. If anyone should be reprimanded, it should be the person who started all of this. Ella. The principal's expression darkened. Daniel, I won't let you disrespect your sister. She's not my sister, sir, Daniel interrupted. She's your daughter. And she's ruining Ruth's life because you're letting her. The principal rose from his seat. You don't get to decide who stays and who leaves in this school because you are not yet on seat. Daniel stepped forward. No, but I can decide what I say about it. And if Ruth is forced out, I'll make it public. Online. Everywhere. I'll tell the truth. The principal's face flushed, the first sign that the pressure had cracked his control. You're threatening me, he growled. I'm protecting her, Daniel replied. For a long moment, Principal Nouku said nothing. He simply stared at him, then at Ruth, then back again. Finally, he sat down again and waved his hand toward the door. Get out, both of you. Ruth hesitated. But Daniel touched her arm gently and guided her out of the room. They didn't speak until they reached the staircase. I'm sorry, Ruth finally said, her voice shaky. Don't be, Daniel replied. You didn't do anything wrong. I never thought I would be one of those students the principal tries to expel without cause. Daniel stopped walking and looked at her seriously. You're not just one of those students. You're you? That's why they're trying to push you out. You scare them. Ruth gave a weak laugh. Me? Scary. To people who fear being outshined, he said. Yes. That night, Ruth sat on her mattress, replaying the conversation in the principal's office over and over again. Her mother noticed her silence. Ruth, she called softly from her bed. Yes, Mama. What happened in school? Ruth hesitated. Then told her everything. Her mother listened, quiet but present. At the end, she sighed. People will always try to dim the light they don't understand. But you were not born to hide, Ruth. You were born to rise. Ruth felt her eyes burn. She leaned over and hugged her mother tightly. But even as they sat in that small room, something bigger was brewing. Because Ella wasn't done. She had seen the way her father returned from school that day, angry and rattled. She knew Daniel had stood up for Ruth again. And this time, she had made a decision. If Ruth wouldn't leave quietly, she would be dragged out screaming. She picked up her phone, opened a hidden gallery album, and stared at a video she had secretly recorded weeks ago, Ruth speaking softly to Quinn about her family struggles, how her mom's illness meant she sometimes sold snacks in secret to make ends meet. Ella smiled. Let's see how the school reacts when they find out their top student is a secret hawker begging for school fees. The following Monday morning started like every other, but the air felt heavier as if the school itself knew something dark was about to unfold. Ruth stepped into the compound with her head down, her bag hugged close to her chest. She had barely slept the night before. Though Daniel's words gave her courage, but Principal Nouku's threat lingered like smoke in her lungs. She kept wondering, would today be the day she got sent out for good? But she had no idea what Ella had planned. By 8:15 a.m., just a class after assembly, students' phones began buzzing one after the other. A message had dropped on the school WhatsApp group again, this time, with a video. Your favorite girl isn't who you think she is. The thumbnail was already damning, Ruth, in a faded pink gown, sitting on a stool under a tree. A tray of buns and soft drinks balanced on her lap as she spoke softly to a Queen about her sick mother, selling during weekends, and how she sometimes used break time to sneak snacks to junior students. By 8:20 a.m., nearly every student had watched it. Laughter echoed in the corridors. Some whispered. Others simply stared at Ruth with wide eyes, some pitiful, some cruel. She didn't know what had happened until she heard a voice behind her whisper, "So this is our class vendor." She turned and saw the screen. Her heart stopped. Then her ears rang. For a second, she couldn't breathe. She felt exposed like someone had stripped her soul in front of an audience. Everything spun around her. She dropped her bag and ran, not toward the classroom, not toward Daniel, but straight to the girls' restroom. She locked the door, sat on the cold third floor, and buried her face in her hands. How did they get the video? Who recorded that? Who hated her this much? But she already knew the answer. Ella. Meanwhile, Daniel was in the school parking lot, getting out of the car when his phone buzzed. He opened the video, watched it once, and felt his hands clench around the phone like a vice. He didn't care about the content he already knew about Ruth's sacrifices. But the malice behind the leak made his blood boil. He stormed into the school compound, walked straight to the admin block, and burst into his father's office. She needs protection, he said without greeting. Mr. Akond, Daniel's father and the school owner, looked up. What are you talking about, Ruth? Someone just leaked a private video of her. This school has turned into a battlefield and your staff are just watching. Daniel slammed the phone on the desk. Watch it. His father watched, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at his son and said, I handle it. But Daniel wasn't done. No, Dad. Please, you're going to do more than handle it. You're going to protect her the same way you protect this school's reputation. At the same time, Ruth remained in the restroom, numb and broken, until she heard a soft knock. Ruth. She recognized the voice instantly. Daniel. I know you're in there, he said gently. Please open up. She hesitated. Then, slowly, she unlocked the door. The moment he saw her face, something in him cracked. Her eyes were red. Her shoulders hunched as if she was trying to fold herself into nothing. I'm sorry, she whispered, avoiding his gaze. Daniel shook his head. You have nothing to be sorry for. They do. But everyone knows now, she said. About my life, my family, the snacks, everything. It's over. He stepped closer. No. It's just beginning. Ruth looked up at him, confused. You think I liked you because you were perfect, he said. I liked you because you're real. Because you fight for your family. Because even with all this, you still show up. You still care. Ruth's lips trembled. But they are laughing. Daniel took her hand. Then let them laugh. When they are done, they'll see you're still standing. Later that day, an emergency assembly was called. The school owner himself stood on the podium. Today, a student was humiliated for working hard to support her family, Mr. Akan began. This school stands for excellence, not privilege. And from this moment, any student found spreading malicious content or bullying others will face serious disciplinary action. He paused. Including suspension or expulsion. No exceptions. Every student turned to look at Ella, who stood rigid at the far end of the crowd, her mouth tight. Daniel stood beside Ruth the entire time, his presence a quiet declaration. Later that evening, after most of the school had emptied, Ella remained in the hallway, fuming. Anita approached her. You said the video would finish her, Anita whispered. Instead, you made her famous. Ella's eyes burned with rage. I'm not done. But deep inside, a new fear was growing, because Ruth wasn't just surviving. She was rising. The Monday after the emergency assembly was quieter than usual. No whispers. No notes. No laughter trailing behind Ruth as she walked through the school gates. But silence didn't always mean peace. Sometimes, it meant anticipation. Students watched her differently now, not with amusement, but curiosity. After all, it wasn't every day that a poor girl stood in the middle of an elite school's battlefield, got publicly dragged, and walked away stronger. Ruth felt it too. The weight of 1,000 eyes, the hush of held breaths, the invisible spotlight. For the first time, she wasn't hiding from it. She was walking through it. Daniel walked beside her, hands in his pockets, eyes steady on the path ahead. There was something powerful about their quiet togetherness, like two storms standing still, refusing to move. They entered the school compound just in time for morning assembly. This time, it wasn't the principal or the school owner addressing the students, it was the head girl, Miriam. She cleared her throat and stepped forward. Before we continue today's announcements, we have something special. Ruth has something she'd like to say. A ripple passed through the crowd. Ruth. Public speaking. Even the teachers looked surprised. Daniel turned to her, gave her a soft nod. No words, just trust. Ruth stepped forward. Her legs trembled, but she didn't stop. Her palms were sweaty, but she didn't wipe them. She climbed the short steps and stood on the assembly platform, facing the very students who had once mocked her, pitied her, ignored her. She took a deep breath. My name is Ruth she began, voice small but clear. I'm the girl who walks in worn shoes. The girl who carries the same bag every year. The one who brings home cooked lunch in a reused yogurt container. Laughter flickered in the back, but she raised her voice. I'm also the girl who ranks first in almost every subject. The girl who reads after selling snacks. The one who stays up caring for her mother and still shows up for early morning classes. The girl who stood in the rain to help someone she didn't even know. The crowd grew quiet. I used to believe that silence was safer. That if I just kept my head down, I could survive. But silence didn't protect me. It only gave my bullies more space. She turned slightly, her eyes grazing over the crowd. I won't be silent anymore. And with that, she stepped down. Not another word. Not another breath wasted. Just truth delivered without apology. The entire assembly ground stood still. Then came the claps, not loud, not wide, but sincere. From one corner, then another, then more. By the time Ruth returned to Daniel's side, she was shaking, not with fear, but with adrenaline. You were amazing, he whispered. I feel like I'm floating, she whispered back, half laughing. You should. They walked back to class, and for the first time since SS1 began, Ruth felt like she belonged, not because she changed herself, but because she finally claimed herself. But not everyone was clapping. From the balcony of the admin block, Ella watched in silent fury. She gripped the railing so tight her knuckles turned white. Anita stood beside her, quiet. You've lost the school, Anita said after a long pause. Ella didn't respond. She couldn't, because she knew it too. But deep in her heart, the jealousy wasn't just about attention anymore. It was about Daniel. He had chosen Ruth, publicly, consistently, unshaken. And Ella had never felt more invisible. Meanwhile, in the classroom, Ruth was met with something she hadn't felt in years, kindness. Two girls offered her a seat beside them. Someone gave her a compliment on her speech. Even the strict biology teacher smiled as she marked Ruth present. Later that afternoon, Daniel found her sitting under their favorite tree by the science block, legs crossed, a novel in her hand, wind playing with her braids. Reading again, he asked, dropping beside her. Always, she smiled. Books don't judge. Daniel chuckled. Unlike humans. They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that felt full, not empty. Then he turned to her. Ruth. There's something I've been thinking about for a while. She closed the book and looked at him. I didn't become your friend because I felt sorry for you, he began. I didn't stay because of how strong you are. I stayed because you make everything feel real. You remind me of the part of myself I forget. Her eyes searches. I know things have been hard, he continued, but I was wondering if maybe we could try something more. You and me. Ruth's breath caught in her throat. Are you asking me out? She said, a half smile tugging her lips. Daniel nodded. Yeah, I am. She looked down, then back at him, then whispered, I thought you would never ask. They both smiled. No fancy declarations, no fireworks. Just two people who had walked through fire and found each other. But while they found peace in that moment, Ella found something else. Desperation. And in desperation, people often make dangerous choices. She wasn't done. Not yet. The sun filtered gently through the mango trees near the science block, casting golden shadows on the ground as Daniel and Ruth sat side by side, two notebooks open, pens dancing in near silent sync. It had been 3 days since Daniel asked her out, and though nothing dramatic changed between them, everything felt different. The silence they once shared now buzzed with soft comfort, and their conversations drifted between physics formulas and dreams about the future. They studied together every day after classes, often staying longer than anyone else. The school librarian had come to know their rhythm, books borrowed, notes exchanged, quiet laughter echoing behind bookshelves. Daniel had a way of explaining things that made even the densest topic feel simple, while Ruth challenged him with her sharp insights and detailed summaries. They were a team, and it showed. During one of their study breaks, Ruth leaned back on the bench and closed her eyes. I used to think love was a distraction. Something for girls with no goals. Daniel smiled, brushing a fallen leaf off her shoulder. And now? She opened one eye to look at him. Now I think the right kind of love actually makes you focus more. He chuckled. Good. Because if you fail chemistry, I feel responsible. Ruth grinned and bumped his shoulder. If I fail chemistry, the world is ending. Their bond had become something real, grounded in shared effort, trust, and the joy of just being present. They weren't the loud couple in school, they weren't glued to each other. But those who paid attention could see it in the way Daniel waited for her outside every class. The way Ruth saved a seat for him in the library. The way they smiled, softly, quietly, only at each other. But not everyone was happy. Ella watched all of it from afar. She had stopped trying to get people on her side. The school had already shifted. The students who once feared her now admired Ruth. Even the teachers had noticed. But Ella didn't just feel rejected. She felt erased. And it was killing her. That Thursday morning, Anita found her in the empty music room, staring at the cracked mirror. You haven't posted anything on your WhatsApp story in days, Anita said, chewing gum. Ella didn't respond. You're not even fighting anymore. I thought you said Ruth would regret ever stepping into this school. I did say that, Ella murmured, still staring at herself. And I meant it. She turned sharply. You know what the problem is, Anita? Anita shrugged. Tell me. People like Ruth get celebrated for pain, for struggle. They wear pity like a crown and suddenly everyone forgets who they really are. Anita raised a brow. You still have a plan. Ella gave a small, bitter smile. It's not about plans anymore. It's about exposure. Everyone's rooting for the poor girl. But what if the poor girl has a darker side? Anita narrowed her eyes. What are you talking about? Ella didn't answer. But the next day, something strange happened. Daniel and Ruth were preparing for a quiz competition, representing the school as a team, another honor that came as no surprise to anyone. As they sat at the back of the library, walking through practice questions, Mr. Odigon, the vice principal, approached them. Ruth, he said gently, may I speak with you privately? Ruth glanced at Daniel, who gave a small nod. They stepped aside to a corner. There's something I need to ask, Mr. Odigon said, confidentially. Ruth blinked. Yes, sir. Did you at any point forge a recommendation letter to apply for a scholarship last term? Ruth's eyes widened. What? I'm not accusing you, he added quickly. Someone submitted an anonymous report to the scholarship board claiming you falsified a teacher's endorsement. Ruth shook her head, stunned. I never did that. I would never. The vice principal looked at her for a long time before nodding. I believe you. But you should know they're investigating. Ruth felt her legs weaken. Who would do that? Why now? But the answer came to her too quickly. Ella. Again. That evening, Ruth sat under the same tree with Daniel, but this time she didn't smile. She stared at her open book without reading a word. Daniel noticed. What happened? He asked. She told him. He was silent for a long time. Then, this is getting out of hand. I don't know what to do, Ruth whispered. She keeps coming at me. Every time I stand up, she finds a new way to knock me down. Daniel took her hand. Then we stop hiding. We fight back with truth. You're not alone anymore, Ruth. She looked at him. Really looked at him. I used to think the only way to survive was to disappear. But now you make me want to be seen, he smiled. Then be seen. Loudly. And for the rest of that evening, they didn't study formulas or facts. They studied each other, dreams, fears, stories they hadn't shared before. By the time they parted ways, Ruth's heart felt a little lighter, even though the world still felt heavy. But Ella, she had only just begun her final move. Because in her hands, she now held a forged email, a fake document she doctored herself. And her next target, not Ruth, but Daniel. Since she couldn't do anything about Ruth and Daniel from SS1 to SS3, she was going to turn him against Ruth before they graduate, even if it meant destroying them both. The weeks after final exams and before graduation felt surreal. Decorations went up. Students started rehearsing speeches. Uniforms were ironed crisp. Everyone talked about what came next, university dreams, farewell parties, yearbook messages. But for Ruth, it felt like walking on cracked glass. Ever since the forged scholarship accusation surfaced, she has been under silent scrutiny. The school hasn't said anything about cancelling her exams. No official punishment was announced. But the whispers were back. And this time, they weren't just from students. Teachers glanced at her differently. Friends hesitated. Even Queen, her seatmate, asked quietly one day, Ruth, you didn't actually forge anything, right? Ruth didn't blame her. The doubt had been planted too well. She knew who did it. Ella had grown quiet lately. She no longer walked the halls like a queen. She wasn't posting, gossiping, or even retaliating when students avoided her. But Ruth wasn't fooled. This was her final card. And it came crashing down 2 days before graduation. Daniel found the email first. It had been forwarded to his inbox anonymously. A screenshot of an internal message between a teacher and the scholarship board, supposedly confirming that Ruth used a fake recommendation letter, one bearing his own father's name as a reference. Daniel stared at it, stunned. Was this real? His father's name. That meant someone forged a reference in the owner's name. Could Ruth have done that? No. It didn't feel right. But the evidence. He didn't confront Ruth immediately. He paced the field for nearly an hour, reading the email again and again. And that evening, he didn't show up to their usual study spot. Ruth waited. For an hour. Then 2. She called. No answer. Texted. No reply. Her heart sank. Not because of fear, but because she knew. Something had shifted. The next morning, Daniel still avoided her. And for the first time in weeks, he didn't walk her to class. He didn't sit beside her. He didn't look at her. Ruth felt like she was falling back into the void she had fought so hard to escape. But this time, she didn't run. During break, she stood up in the middle of the class, her hands trembling slightly, and said, "Daniel, can we talk?" The room went quiet. Everyone froze. Daniel looked up slowly. His face was unreadable. She walked outside. He followed. They stood behind the library, where it all began. The tree swayed above them like a silent witness. "You're avoiding me," she said, voice low but steady. Daniel looked away. "I got an email." "From who?" "Anonymous. But it claims you forged a scholarship letter using my dad's name." Ruth blinked, then shook her head. "You believe that?" Daniel hesitated. "I don't know what to believe, Ruth. The email looks real." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "I've worked for everything," she whispered. "Everything. I've bled and broken and stayed up all night just to prove I belong here. And even you think I would cheat?" Daniel stepped closer. "I didn't say I believed it. I just what?" She snapped. "That I'm capable of it because I'm poor." His eyes widened. "No. Never." "Then why are we having this conversation?" He looked down, ashamed. Ruth exhaled. "If you don't trust me now, Daniel, maybe you never really did." She turned and walked away, her steps heavy but sure. That night, she cried. Not for the email, not even for Ella, but because she had finally let someone in completely and now that door felt slammed shut. But just as dawn broke the next morning, Daniel showed up at her gate. With proof. "I found the source," he said breathlessly. Ruth stepped out, confused. What? It wasn't real. The email. It was doctored. Ella used an online generator and created the screenshot. One of the school's IT students she used bragged about it on a chat group. "I got the screenshots." He handed them to her. "I'm so sorry," Daniel whispered. "I should have trusted you." Ruth looked at him for a long moment. Then said, "I don't need apologies. I just need you to believe me the first time." Daniel nodded. "I do. From now on, I believe you, always." She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She just turned and walked back into her house. And Daniel knew he had to earn her again. The day of graduation arrived. Students filed into the school auditorium in neat gowns and polished shoes. Ruth wore a simple white dress under her robe, borrowed from her mother's friend. Her hair braided neatly, her face calm. When names were called for special awards, Ruth's name echoed across the stage 3 times: best in science, most consistent, and overall academic excellence. She stood with quiet grace and collected each award, smiling politely at the claps. Then it was time for Daniel's speech, valedictorian's address. He walked to the podium, adjusted the mic, and began. But somewhere near the end, he paused. "There's one person I need to thank more than anyone," he said. "Someone who reminded me that strength isn't about power or money, but resilience. Someone who taught me that silence isn't strength, and that kindness is revolutionary." He looked out into the crowd, straight at her. "Ruth is, thank you for helping me find my voice." Gasps rose. Then quiet claps. After the ceremony, he found her near the exit. "Ruth," he said. She turned slowly. "I never stopped caring," he said. "And if you still have me, I would like to be yours. Officially." She looked at him for a long moment, then smiled softly. "I love you too." They walked back to the school field. Graduation day should have felt like the end, but for Ruth, it was a beginning she never imagined she'd earn. As she stood at the edge of the school field, the warm breeze carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass, she clutched her award plaques close to her chest. Her name had been called, applauded, celebrated, and not because anyone felt sorry for her, but because she deserved it. She had made it, not as a shadow, not as the girl behind the scenes, but as Ruth is, loud, seen, respected. Students surrounded her, asking to take photos. Teachers shook her hand with genuine smiles. Even those who once mocked her now whispered words like inspiring and fearless. But the one face missing from the crowd was Ella's. Ella had been suspended from the graduation quietly 2 days before graduation. The evidence of her forged email had reached the school board. Though her father tried to protect her at first, the weight of Daniel's intervention and Mr. Akon's insistence forced the school's hand. She wasn't expelled after all. She was done with her secondary school, but she was removed from all public school activities. Her name wasn't called at the ceremony. Her seat at the front row, empty. Her legacy, erased. And Ella? She didn't fight it. For the first time, she was silent. Alone in her room, she scrolled through videos from graduation on her phone. Ruth in her robe. Daniel delivering his speech. Students cheering. Her hands trembled as she watched. She had everything once: status, popularity, protection, and still, it wasn't enough. Because deep down, what she wanted most wasn't power. It was Daniel. And she lost him. Not to someone richer, but to someone real. Back on the school field, Ruth sat quietly on the edge of a bench under the tree where so much of her life had changed. Daniel walked over, holding 2 cups of ice cream. "One for the valedictorian," he said, "and one for the scandalous snack girl." Ruth teased with a soft smile. He laughed. "The bravest girl I've ever known." She took the cup and looked at him, really looked at him. He has been through a lot too, scrutinized for loving her, questioned by even his own father. But he never gave up, he never left. "I wasn't sure you would come back," she said, voice quiet. Daniel leaned forward. "Even if you pushed me away 100 times, I will still come back. Because it's you." She looked down, eyes glistening. "I didn't just fall in love with you, Ruth," he continued. "I grew with you. And I want to keep growing with you." She set the cup down, reached out, and took his hand. "I'm ready," she said. He smiled. "So do we tell the world?" She laughed. "Let's just tell the future." That evening, Ruth walked home in her white dress, her mother waiting at the door with open arms. Her younger brother danced around the living room with one of her awards. The house was still small. The roof still leaked when it rained. But everything inside it glowed with pride. Later that night, she opened her acceptance letter, full scholarship to one of the best universities in the country. The recommendation, reinstated, cleared, official. She cried. Not because it was hard, but because it was finally over. The girl who once hid behind school blocks, dodged Ella's cruel pranks, and walked with her eyes glued to the floor, now stood taller than ever. No longer the victim, no longer the weak one, not even the smart one, just Ruth, strong, loved, and finally, free. As for Daniel, he stayed by her side, through uni applications, through long-distance calls, through dreams whispered under trees and in libraries. And he planned to propose to her one day, under that same tree where everything began. But that's another story. Because this particular story ends here with a girl who found her voice and a boy who never stopped listening. Thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe for more.